Hi guys, I'm Reagan, if you don't already know, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Snow White while painting what I think is an iconic scene from the animated version, which is Snow White in the glass coffin. Before I get into that, I guess I just want to talk a little bit about how Snow White is essentially a very long game of telephone. So we have the Disney live action that just came out this year, which is an adaptation of the animation, which was inspired by a silent film, which was an adaptation of a play which was an adaptation of the Grimm Brothers version, and they just wrote down stories that were already being told. So, very, very long game of telephone, and the story changed along the way, and I can't wait to tell you more about it. So the story of Snow White was first collected or written down by the Grimm Brothers. Their names were Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Jacob was the older one, having been born in 1785, and Wilhelm only a year later in 1786. When they were 11 and 10 respectively, their father actually died, which led them going from being a middle-class family to being in poverty. After their father died, they both went to the University of Marburg to study law. Jacob actually paused his studies because during this time there was the Napoleonic Wars between 1803 and 1815. Wilhelm did graduate and pass his law exams, but he became a librarian at the Royal Library. And Jacob, not long after, kind of followed in Wilhelm's footsteps, also became a librarian, but specifically for King Jerome, who was Napoleon's brother. Only a year after becoming the librarian for King Jerome, their mother died in 1808, leaving them in charge of their three younger brothers and younger sister. In that same year, their friend and poet Clement Brentano asked them to start collecting folk tales so that he could publish it in a literary collection of fairy tales. Only 2 years later, in 1810, they actually did send Brentano 54 texts, which include some of the most iconic fairy tales, including Snow White, Cinderella, Rumpelstiltskin, and so many more. Unfortunately, he did leave it behind or misplace it in Oldenburg Monastery. 2 years later, in 1812, they realized that their friend, in fact, wasn't going to publish the tales, and so they published them themselves. They did add to it, so instead of 54 texts, there was actually 86. They focused mostly on German tales because they viewed it as a very pure form of culture that would bring the community together. It was called Children and Household Tales, although it wasn't intended to actually be read to children, but rather it was about children and families reacting to difficult situations. It was meant more for a scholarly audience, just to keep these tales and stories alive and to keep them from being forgotten. Over the next 45 years, the brothers published 6 more versions. The first edition is thought to be a more accurate depiction of the oral traditions and storytelling, versus the last edition, and really just any of the later editions, were meant to resonate with the public, because that is who was reading it. In fact, it was so popular that at one point it was the second best-selling book ever in Germany, only following the Bible. Some things about the story of Snow White never changed. For example, the queen having a mirror on the wall telling her that she is the fairest of them all, and once she is surpassed by Snow White, she wants to kill her. Well, in the original, she is about 7, and instead of being her stepmother, it's actually her mother who wants to kill her. And in fact, when she tells the huntsman to take Snow White out back and kill her, she actually wants her heart and liver so that she can salt them and eat them. I don't remember there being cannibalism in the Disney version. The story takes from other folktales, for example from Goldilocks. She actually tests out each of the dwarves' beds until she finds one that is just right for her. But interestingly, the dwarves don't have personalities or even names. They're not really individuals. In the Grimm Brothers version, the queen actually visits the dwarves' house 3 times and kills Snow White 3 times. The first time, she says that she is selling ribbons and corsets, and when Snow White comes out, she says she needs to relace Snow White's corset because I guess it's atrocious. She tightens it so much that she can't breathe, and Snow White falls, well, dead. But once the dwarves come home and they loosen up the corset, she can breathe again. The second time she comes over, she is saying that she's selling hair combs and clips and such, and puts it into Snow White's hair, and of course it's poisoned, so as you can guess, Snow White falls down dead. But once it's removed, Snow White's fine. And the third time is one that we all know and love, which is the poison apple. She bites into it and falls down dead. Very shocking, right? You would think at some point Snow White would learn stranger danger and to not open the door. In the Grimm Brothers version, there's no true love's kiss and all of that to solve the whole poison apple issue. In fact, the prince shows up, sees Snow White, and goes, "Man, she's pretty. I want to gaze upon her all the time, like a piece of art," and tries to buy her off of the dwarves. Initially, they say no, but I guess as he keeps asking and is being rather pitiful about it, and in fact decide to give her to him. Something I would love to see in a movie adaptation of Snow White is the Grimm Brothers' solution to the whole poison apple situation, because it is hilarious in my opinion. So in the first edition, the prince has his servants carrying Snow White in her coffin from room to room with him so that he can always gaze upon her and be with her. And one of the servants gets rather annoyed about this whole thing, opens her coffin and slaps her, which causes her to cough up the poison apple, and that is what saves her. That does change in later editions. Instead of being slapped awake, as they carry her away from the dwarves into the palace, the servants kind of drop her, which is what gives her essentially a Heimlich maneuver and causes her to cough up the apple. What doesn't change in the editions is the punishment of the evil queen. So when Snow White awakens, her and the prince decide to get married and send a wedding invitation off to her mom or stepmom. And the queen knows it isn't going to go great, but shows up anyway for some reason. And they put metal clogs on her feet and make them red hot over the flame and make her dance herself to death. Even though Snow White is the titular character, it didn't seem like she was the main character to me or who the lesson was about, right? It's really about the evil queen, who just can't handle the fact that her daughter or stepdaughter has exceeded her in any capacity and is just led by jealousy and envy until she meets her demise. The 1937 animated film was a huge technical step forward. I mean, it was the first fully drawn, full-length animated movie. Although there was technically an animated movie earlier than that, it used silhouettes and had more of a stop-motion format. In fact, it cost $1.6 million for 750 artists over 3 years to paint over 2 million paintings for Snow White. And to give Snow White that 3D feel, they created something called the multi-plane camera that added that depth. It was a huge critical and fandom success. It made $8 million in the box office, which is around $177 million today, and in 1938 it was nominated for the Best Musical Score for the Oscars. In fact, it was so successful that it allowed Disney to build their studio in Burbank. Before it came out, people weren't sure that it was going to be able to hold their attention because of the type of animations they were used to. In fact, I found this review from December 27th, 1937 from the Times. Skeptical Hollywood had wondered whether a fairy story could have enough suspense to hold an audience through 7 reels, and whether, even if the plot held up, an audience would care about the fate of characters who were just drawings, was convinced that Walt Disney had done it again. Snow White is as exciting as a Western, as funny as a haywire comedy. It combines the classic idiom of folklore drama with rollicking comedy strip humor. Today we will show the film to young kids. But at the time, the British Board of Film Classification mandated that children under 16 could not see the film without an adult due to its scary scenes. I mean, in fairness, they only had 3 classifications, which was suitable for everyone, 16s and under needed to have an adult present, or not suitable for 16 and under. It was such an innovative film that Walt Disney got given an honorary Oscar in 1939. It was presented to Walt Disney by Shirley Temple, and it has to be the most unique Oscar I have ever seen. It had the standard full-size Oscar with 7 mini statuettes for the 7 dwarfs. Thank you so much for staying this long in the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you think that I should do more like these or have any recommendations for future things that I should research, please let me know, because I had so much fun painting and researching Snow White for this. You might like some of the videos I've already posted or videos that I have coming up, so please check those out on my channel, and I hope you join me next time.